Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today are Joel Elston and Sam Page.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
We're so glad to have the band back together again, all three of us in the same spot at the same time, which is probably just as well because when I first set up the links and so forth for today's episode for people who like to listen to the live stream, I didn't really have a topic in mind. I hadn't heard from Joel, and he usually has something, but we've discovered today that Joel actually did send me something. I just didn't see it. Went to the wrong folder, unfortunately. But it's a very cool concept because it's about what is being termed as reality creation. And as soon as I saw that term, Joel, even before I read what you wrote, I thought to myself, well, yeah, that's really the core of it, isn't it? Because different people have different ideas about how reality is created. Different religions have different ideas about how reality is created. We here in our LOA spiritual circles have ideas that are quite different from what most people think about when they think about how reality is created. So well done, first of all, for coming up with the topic, because you hit the nail on the head. This is the dividing point right here. You know, this is like it's the tipping point, right?
And it's the reconciliation, like you said before we started talking, between science and, the traditional science and the law of attraction.
Yeah.
And it as I was, my poor brain went into a deep dive on this, and I just trying to sort of quantify it and think about it versus, I was brought up, you're born into whatever you're born into. And you have very little control over the reality you're born into. However, when you find out later, your perspective of that reality is in your control, but that's usually not right away. And so there's a lot of people that are really offended by that concept, that you create your own reality. They would say, I would never create that reality. And I sort of have some feelings on where that goes. So we can do a deep dive, but I like it. I love the topic.
Yeah, I do too. And I totally agree about what you just said, the idea of creating your own reality. I'm one who buys into the idea that we create our own reality, but it took me a while to get there.
Yes.
Because like you, I came from the other teaching. I grew up in a Christian church, and that's not what Christianity teaches. It's not really close at all to what Christianity teaches. But after a while, I had to kind of admit, very reluctantly, I might add, but I had to kind of admit that the evidence kind of goes the other way. So that's where this becomes really, really it becomes touchy on a number of different levels. I mean, it certainly is touchy with anybody who's ever experienced severe trauma that they've, didn't really feel like they had any role in bringing in. That's probably where the biggest disagreements lie in those kinds of experiences. One of my favorite things to say here on the show is, I believe I create my own reality. I believe that I had an intention about what I was going to do when I got here. And the thought that keeps going through my mind is, what was I thinking?
Yeah, good point.
Seriously, I think I ask myself often, I apparently set myself up for X, whatever this X is. What on earth was I thinking when I did that? What led me to believe that this is a great experience? Like, maybe I should need to check the brochure again.
We'll do that when we get back there. And before we decide to come back the next time, we'll discuss what happened.
Probably.
We won't know until we get there. So
we'll have to change travel agents.
yeah, exactly.
But when you sent me this email, though, you had something particular in mind about what motivated you to send it. What did motivate you?
Well, I actually have a young person that I've been working with who had a horrible childhood. And, he is into the, concepts of the law of attraction, but some of the challenges he was facing, or most people do early in the process, is we were talking about reality creation. Do we create a reality, or is it your reality dictated to you? And he said, but my beginning reality was certainly dictated to me. I didn't have any awareness that I could possibly change. So I was stuck in what they gave me. And I shared my experience, and I'm more comfortable sharing mine than his. So I grew up into, a load of crazy. Everybody was crazy. I had a severely alcoholic grandfather, biological father was a horrible compulsive gambler. There was all kind of addiction in other family members. There was mental illness. I've seen, at 5 years old, I watched my grandfather beat up my grandmother, and all those things. So the reality at that point was that what was in front of me was my reality.
Yeah.
And the people around me who had the influence over me, they had nothing but that reality too. So we were all living in the fear of all of that. And so it was horrible. So my initial reaction when you say I created that reality is, no, I mean, maybe I did at some point, but there's a period of time that I had no ability in any other way to live outside of that reality. And so that's a very tangible point. That's where most people get involved. Most people who have trouble early, particularly with the law of attraction, we get stuck on that. So what I was able to do as everything unfolded with time, I now come to realize why I would have created that reality and why I would have to live through it to become the man I am today. I would have to choose this life with all the stuff that happened, because I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing today with my perspective if I didn't live through that. That was my schooling. That was my training. That was my empathy building piece of my life, where I'm able to say, yeah, when my clients say, Joel, you don't know what it's like to go through what I'm going through. It's like, well, maybe that ain't the case often. And I don't view that anymore as traumatic. When I was homeless in Las Vegas and eating out of a trash can to survive, that was trauma. That was horrible. But at the same time, that was a necessary event that later played a role in my life. So I start seeing things in not the one-dimensional time direction of forward. So everything that took place in everyone's life, in my belief, is a catalyst to move you to that next level. It's how you end up where you end up. If I wanted to be the life, I love the life I have today. I'm so grateful for the life I have today. I now see the path that was necessary. I wonder myself sometimes, like, wow, that was a crazy choice of path to get where I'm at. But I wouldn't have gotten there traditionally because I was, again, brought up in an environment that everything I believe now was considered crazy or sacrilegious, or I was burning in hell. Those are all things I heard. And, so now to be at this place, I first of all, I know I am bulletproof. I'm Iron Man. I've survived everything. I'm incredibly resilient. So all those events were schooling for me. They were training. So my reality creation can be retrospective, not necessarily looking forward always. Now, I create my reality every day now, since I do have that power. But at the time when we don't have that power, that's one of the things that, I look back and say, yes, did I create that reality to get where I'm at today? I could see that as a plausible explanation. And that is not by any means, because a lot of people that are going to be offended by this, me. By the way, it's Walt at loatoday.net. But the truth is, most people, when they're able to see the things that happen to get them where they're at, nobody would ever do what I did. I wouldn't want to go through it again. But the fact I survived it, went through it, was a necessary chain of events to get me where I'm at today. If I didn't go through that, my kids wouldn't have had a dad. The people that I helped wouldn't have me. It all makes complete sense now. And I would not change any of it. If I was given that option, but I now can accept retroactively, looking back, I can see how that would be a necessary part of my experience. And the fact that I had no clue, or anyone around me suggesting that I had a clue or power to any of this stuff, I went through it raw. I went through it as I had no choice. I was forced to feel it completely. And so again, it was part of my growth process. So I'm able to look at that from the perspective. And in today's world, I certainly create every aspect of my reality. It took me a long time to get to the place where I create the pure reality that I'm in, but it's amazing. It's easy. It's autopilot to do that. And it's a great way to live. But the process was a 50-year process for me, literally.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way that you frame that too, because what you're really doing is answering the question that I originally tried to answer myself, which is, okay, if we were experiencing all this crazy stuff, what on earth was I thinking? Well, part of the answer is I was thinking that I needed to get to that particular perspective in order to have the life I wanted to have. And the only way to get to that perspective was to go through the trauma.
Yes.
I can almost make sense out of that one.
Yeah. And it's because I'm not somebody that would have taken a normal route to being a therapist. That's not my brain usually.
Yeah.
I mean, it is now, but all those things had to happen. When I was a kid, they did a evaluation of what you're going to be when you grow up with your personality traits, like 8 years old.
Right.
And I remember being horribly embarrassed when they said, you're going to be someone. They started with somebody that's a pastor or clergy or someone who helps people.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember being so like, I am not going to be one of those crazy preachers that's doing all that crazy stuff. And that's all I focused on. And so I laughed today that I'm literally exactly what my 8-year-old self was told would be by my personality type. And that, the level when people go through things, I've shared some of the stories of my clients over the years who have turned far worse situations than mine. I mean, horrible, horrible situations that I can't even fathom that have turned them into victory. They've changed their life around. A young man I worked with many years ago was horribly sexually abused by a priest for years, got into recovery from his trauma, changed his perspective. He's now a psychiatrist working with kids who have been sexually abused. So while certainly he tells me all the time, and I'm the one that we talked about that perspective when he was 14. He's 30 something now. And he said, Joel, like you told me, that's what turned me around when I realized, let's make some sense out of this. It's never going to be a good thing. But so when kids sit down with me and I know what they're going through, I can bring a perspective to the table that most people aren't able to bring.
I have to admit, too, I also have a tendency to blur the boundary. And by the boundary, I mean the boundary between, on the one hand, the belief that we create our own reality in all ways, and on the other hand, the belief that the reality was created for us before we got here, and then maybe we become creators after that. The way I blur the boundary is with the metaphor of what source energy is. Source energy being, in our realm, the equivalent of what people call God. And the way I think about it, one of the best words I ever heard to describe my role in the source energy field is as a strand of source energy. I love that word the first time I heard it. I'm a strand of source energy. Like I'm a unit in a sea of similar units. And when I thought about it that way, then I realized, well, that means all the other strands are also creators. We're all creators, but we're not all necessarily creating the same thing, but sometimes we are. And the example of things that we create that are all the same thing, well, we create this planet. We all kind of create this planet together, and we continue to on an ongoing basis. That's what keeps it going as a planet.
Right.
So there's the group effort, and then there's the individual efforts where we're doing, our own little creation things and so forth, and they're all kind of adding to the tapestry of life, so to speak, because the tapestry is contained by all the different little pieces of the tapestry, all little threads of the tapestry. When I think about it that way, well, we all did create everything. We all individually create. Both things are happening. And where did I play a role compared to the rest of the source energy field? Sometimes that gets kind of blurry.
Sure. Absolutely.
It's not really clear sometimes. Well, okay. Was I doing it consciously? Was it the rest of the source? Did I have an agreement going on there? Cosmic agreements or, pre-life agreements that some people talk about, pre-life contracts. I don't know, but I can certainly see the possibilities because they're pretty much endless in terms of all the different ways creation could happen.
Well, the beautiful thing, as you're saying, is we don't know all the details. I have a theory possibly. I have like 80 theories on this, but one of my theories is what if the reality existed that I was born into, and then I propelled from that. It was already there. I didn't create the reality, but I was placed in that reality because my path needed that reality. I'm not saying that because they're within that spectrum of people, their reality at the same time. You have my mother's reality growing up with a severely, a horrible alcoholic. all the stuff he did, just having to live with that. That was her reality. She always she was always a victim of that reality, and she lived with anxiety, depression. I mean, she never ever got past that. She died with that reality. My grandmother, the same thing. Some of my uncles, my biological father ended his life when he, got in trouble. So the reality, we all had different responses to that reality. So that was maybe a stable reality, but our individual aspect of that goes from how we responded to that reality. So that's a variation of what I'm saying, but it comes to the same place.
Yeah. Sam, when you're thinking about what we're talking about here, I mean, how do you think about creation? How do you think of yourself as being a creator? Are you a piece of the whole? Are you independent? I mean, what's your perspective on it?
That's a very interesting topic in general, and for me, because I feel like it's a little bit of both. I think I'm, my own strand of source consciousness, but then also, we're all connection. We're all extensions of source. So it's kind of a very either or, like one or the other. And it's also just thinking about how we come into, manifest into reality. Also just it could be anything. And I guess if you have a belief, then that's your reality. But it's interesting. But I like that there isn't a definitive, standardized answer, because then it allows room to interpret it in any which sort of way. And there's all sorts of possibilities.
Good point.
Yeah, really important point there, because that interpretation, well, you can really use it from either camp's point of view. From the point of view of we create reality, that becomes a way of understanding how we create reality. Just what you just said there, because you get to decide. It was up to you what's your perspective. How are you going to think about this thing?
That's creating. Yes.
Yeah, that's creating. It is. In fact, creation goes on endlessly. Now, let me throw another wrinkle into this one, because this is something I've given a lot of thought to over the last couple of years, especially. And it's also played a role in my own personal life outside of the podcast. I've thought about how it is that we as human beings are, how do I describe it? We're dealing with this stuff on a daily basis, and we're trying to kind of balance from moment to moment, the role that we're playing versus the role that our external circumstances are playing. In fact, I would go so far as to argue that the vast majority of the global population make it a regular practice to either attribute and or blame external stuff for what's going on in their lives, to the point where they can actually convince themselves and others that they themselves are doing nothing to create anything going on in their reality. That is just, it's all happening to them. And it can be even with stuff as simple as, well, simple perhaps is the wrong word, as commonplace, let's put it that way, as commonplace as, like you were saying, alcoholism, drug abuse, something like that, the various kinds of addictions. People are often, you run into this frequently in your practice. You're encountering people who are dealing with an addiction of some kind, and they're saying the addiction is what's causing me to do this. The addiction is causing me to do that. It's the externality that's creating this situation for me. That's kind of like the flip side of this conversation. In other words, at what point do we become responsible for our own stuff?
Well, I'll try to piggyback on what you're saying. You said it really well. That's still creation, what you're doing. If you believe that you're a victim, and I keep using that word, it's not a good word for that. If you are sort of at the mercy of reality or the mercy of addiction, whatever that is, then you have created that belief, and it is true. So you are. Yeah. That's the whole point of creation. That's what. So we go into that from, one of the things, and again, a quick disclaimer, because this is really important. I'm not condoning the use of psilocybin or any drugs, but when people go into a therapeutic trip, one of the most common things that people feel they discover during a psilocybin experience is most of them say, I am God. You are God. We are God. We're one. Just like we're all strands of this. Now, again, that's not a popular message for a lot of people.
Right.
But I don't really know of anyone. I've talked to many people. I've done a lot of research, and that's a really common theme that we are connected. And they say it different ways. Maybe it's not I am God, but they are simply saying we are certainly all part of the whole. So creating, your own, but within that, you can still create individually. But like, for example, right now, the Eiffel Tower is in Paris, right? I said.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
I don't think it's moved. So if it hasn't moved, it's still there. Yes.
Okay. So we have an agreement that the Eiffel Tower exists right now in Paris. We have an agreement. Globally, we understand that, right? And
absolutely.
So that's one of the things we have all bought into. You get there, the Eiffel Tower's there. I'm not going to manifest the Eiffel Tower away. It's there, right? So, those are kind of things that the cumulative group, the mountains, all the things that we know are there. We know they're there because we have all agreed they're there, and they do exist. But it's the creation still has to operate within some kind of collective as well. So individually create. Here's like you're saying. You look at what's going on. Watch any of the news channels. They're all bad. They're all crazy. They have all this stuff going on.
And interestingly enough, neither one of us really watch the news channels much, but when we check in, we find, yep, they're still crazy. They haven't changed.
Crazy. Nothing changed. But I know people that are really believing that we are on the last legs of our country. It's just things are falling apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they're adamant about that. I see people all the time, and I live so far from that reality where I see entirely different things. I've created a reality where, I have an abundance. Yes, prices have gone up, prices have gone down. Eggs were $6 a carton. You know how many cartons of eggs I bought a week where they're $6? I bought 10 cartons a week. You know how much they cost now that they're $2? I bought 10 cartons a week. Don't care. Yeah. My reality never changed with that. Yes, the cost of that went up and down, but it's just so there are people that get into that mode. They feel that what's going on, they turn on the news, they feel they're affected by that. And I am not affected by all this because I don't know what's going on. And that is truly my reality. I hear about crime occasionally. I'm not a victim of crime. I have incredible health. I hear everybody, as you age, when I was at a class reunion, I don't know, whatever that last one was, a pretty big one, I think. And the entire table sitting around talking about what medication they were on. All of them.
Yeah.
And they thought I was kidding when I said, I'm not on anything. I'm not on any medication. I'm in great health, perfect health. And it was just baffling to them that how can you not be on medication? We're all on it. You probably need blood pressure medicine. I don't have high blood pressure. But that's their reality. And that happens with your reality when you get sick, the reality, and all of this. And this is where people they start to get really, not getting what I'm saying. If you're sick, you're sick. You're really sick. I'm not saying it's fake sick.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
It's real. But I am saying that your belief into that plays a role in it as well. We've talked about it on several shows before, but creating a reality from this point is so much easier to understand because now I know how to do it. But whether I was creating my reality or building my ability to create my reality during my early years, I don't know that for sure. Maybe that was just what was needed to get to a place where I could create my own reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm totally buying into what you're saying. In fact, I love the example you gave of what happened at the reunion. I had a very similar experience just over the weekend. I went to a group that was just full of people who were my age and older. But I mean, I felt like I was in the wrong crowd because these people, I mean, oh my God, it was supposed to be a party. It was a party atmosphere. The dancing, I swear to God, half of them looked like they're about ready to keel over.
Yeah.
I was freaking out at it. Like these people are the same age as me, really?
Yeah. Well, I'm at the gym this morning and there's this young man, he was doing deadlifts and he was doing poor form. I was helping him correct his form and he had 315 pounds on the bar. That's a good amount of weight for him. And so I was demonstrating how to do it. And he goes, "Oh my God, you do that so easy." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "But at your age, can you do that?" I go, I clearly just did. And he was fascinated by, he's like, my grandfather maybe is just a year or two older than you, and he like has to walk with a cane.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, again, I'm sorry your grandfather's having to do that, but I've lifted weights for 50 years now, so my body's sort of pretty used to it. So my reality is that I don't look at it the same way, and part of this, when you get deeper down the deeper dive, allowing other people to create their reality and not be triggered by it is also a big part of this. Because yes, I create my own reality, but I find myself sometimes in judgment of what other people are creating their reality. And that's where the work I still have to work on. That's their reality. And no matter what they believe, they're allowed to, that is still their reality. That's what they chose. They might not know, I look at it and go, why would you choose that life?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'll take that a step further. I love what you just said, by the way. But I'll take that a step further and say, to me, it's an exciting point that you just made. I mean, at first glance, it's kind of terrifying, but I think it's an exciting point because what it really demonstrates through the contrast of your experience and their experience, or my experience in that group that I went to see, the contrast shows us that it's not age. It's choices, and it starts to separate the idea of aging from debilitation.
Yes.
Now they become two different unrelated topics, which makes the scientific community crazy, and it makes the religious community crazy. But nevertheless, that's where the divide starts to happen. And it's actually a very healthy. So that's why I celebrate that. I say, wow, that's really great. This is now where we can start to see in the real world, talking about reality creation. We can see in the real world that really the two concepts don't have to go together.
Correct. And that's big.
That's huge.
Yeah. And
definitely find that encouraging.
Good. I'm glad you do, because you're young. You keep that. You got a head start on where I started. So keep
no
that
kidding.
going.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, but also within that, the idea, on that topic, when I hear these people that take positions that are just baffling to me, it's like, I just don't know how you could see it that way. The work that I continue to do, as I said earlier, is just within everything we're saying, allowing others, because that is their reality they're creating, where they believe it or not. I don't have to convince them they're creating it or not. They are, but I don't have to convince them. And I'm okay if, like, I have people say, I've literally had people say, you're crazy. And I said, yes, thank you. Yes. Yes. That's always my answer. Yes, thank you.
Good
answer.
A
Different
I love
reality that you're living in. Yeah. But it doesn't, at the end of the day, it's the satisfaction of life. It's how the worries, the stuff we worry about, the anxiety over finances and, the world and what's out of your control. Your reality can include that or not, or realize, again, the second thing that happens when people have a psilocybin experience, on top of the I am God sense, the second message I hear most often is, none of this matters. None of it matters.
Yeah.
None of this matters at all on any level. That's pretty big.
That is pretty big. There's also an interesting little irony in that phrase, because I've heard that same thing. But the irony is the word matter.
Yeah.
This is a world of matter. Matter is really an extension of energy, what we often call source energy, or Sam describes source consciousness. Okay. So it's an ironic thing to say that this world of matter that we created doesn't matter.
Exactly. That's a good point.
It's just one of those strange things. It kind of illustrates, though, what the doesn't matter idea is really all about. Yeah, there is matter, but it's constructed. It isn't like matter is the essence of all things. It's the energy that's the essence of all things.
Right.
And the matter gets created out of it. And I think that's really what the whole value of that phrase is. The matter doesn't matter.
Right. The agreements or whatever we have that of what matters or what we should be worried about or all those things. At the end of the day, we're going to live whatever the lifestyle. I've accepted the fact that this physical body at some point will give way. I'm still not 100% convinced, but let's say
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I get
yeah.
it.
I see no evidence it's going to happen, but it may. So, but even if it does, there's nothing but energy in this shell. And so that energy can't be killed. It goes on. So as long as this is perpetual, so when, and this gets to be a concept that, I almost don't even want to start it, but I will. When you realize nothing matters, so everything that seems traumatic on this planet it's a pinpoint in time that
Wow, yeah.
we look at, so you have a horrible life and it lasted for 80 years or whatever it lasted for. And let's assume, and I believe this, let's say you have unlimited life. Let's say, I probably have been here, I don't know, and, a countless number of times. So the idea that, I might have been born and died in 2 days and one of those, I don't know. I mean, there could have been a bunch of things happen, but
sure.
Accepting that and at least that as a possibility. But the main lesson that people are getting from these experiences, again, in a therapeutic setting, are what we're worried about is not necessary to worry. You're losing the idea that we're stressed over, did this woman text me back? Did whatever the capacity is, or am I going to have enough money to pay my bills? Or, can I survive this trauma? I'm like, I get to a point now that after, you sort of get your black belt in trauma surviving. Like, I pretty much got it down pat. So, I survive trauma and I thrive after trauma. I grow from trauma. And this is a perspective that you can take as far as you want. And none of this is meant to offend anybody or talk anybody out of their beliefs. No. We're just having a discussion of, I have a different reality than a lot of people around me.
Right.
And that is, I baffle a lot of people too. Like, can't you see that things are falling apart? I go, I cannot. I really can't. Things are fine. It really is. It's right now, things are absolutely perfect. And the more I live that, the more that just remains the same. And there are people that are simultaneous living that where that's a perspective where everything is falling apart. We can coexist and see it differently. It's okay.
One of the co-hosts that I've had on the show, and has also been a recurring guest afterwards, Sam knows him and listeners will know him. His name is David Strickle. But Joel, you probably don't know about him. David is like an Esther Hicks. He can channel source energy. And Esther channels Abraham, David channels the stream of David. So that kind of gives you the lay of the land. One time he was channeling the stream of David, and the stream was telling us that essentially this life is the equivalent of a weekend vacation. And when they presented that, first of all, it jarred me. What do you mean a weekend? There's no vacation about some of the traumas I've been going through, But when you look at it from an internal perspective, it's really nothing more than a weekend vacation.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shock the first time you think about it, but it also in the long term becomes a way of just gaining that perspective you were talking about, where it really doesn't matter. It isn't that big of a deal. And when you get that perspective, that's when you start to become higher vibe.
And that's a very powerful way to live. When you can live as not in a defeated way, but nothing really matters, as a powerful way, that you're good. You're gonna be fine, and you're gonna create new experiences. You're gonna do the thing, within the concept. I love my brain. I love how my brain works. It's exhausting sometimes. I wish I had an off button for that brain.
Yeah, right.
But you saw where I wrote you. That was just that was like at 5 o'clock this morning. So
And it was long. I mean, lately you have been sending me emails full of content. I mean, back in the day when we were doing our shows earlier, you'd send me something that was 3 sentences. Now it's paragraphs. It's like an entire article, with appendices and footnotes. I mean, just wow. Oh my goodness.
Well, when it's easy to say, look at this book, that's the easy way.
Right.
But when I'm doing the concept, I need to give you a little more context,
And I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So, but this going forward is, I'm a firm believer we create our own reality.
Mm.
I also admit I don't have all the details down from the beginning. Were we thrust into an environment? Were we not? Did we adapt? I don't know all of that.
Right.
I do.
I don't
I
either.
do know when you get to a place when you realize you're in charge of your reality. Like one of my 14-year-old clients told me, he goes, Joel, my reality is dictated by my parents, and I'm on restriction right now. And I said, yes, I get that. So he made a really valid point that he does not create that reality. His obnoxious parents do, his words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what he believes. So
Mm-hmm.
I get that perspective at that point.
Yeah.
But he also sees some other sides to it too. He was being silly, but I go, well, you're on restriction for a good reason. So you did create the reality of restriction by your behavior. It works.
That's the topic that keeps coming up in my life a lot. The topic often described as the common factor, the least common denominator of our lives being ourselves.
Yes.
It's one of those really annoying factors because it doesn't go away, and it always seems like we're the ones responsible for our own lives, our own, what happens in our lives, and how we respond to what goes on in our lives. And at first, it's more than annoying. At first, it just plain pisses you off.
Yes.
I mean, it does. It's just, how dare you? And then eventually the least common denominator idea, the metaphor of, I'm the one factor in all the events of my life, it starts to come home and you almost become resigned to it. Like, okay, here it is again. It's all on me. You're going to blame me again, aren't you? And that actually becomes an issue because we can blame ourselves really good. We can beat the crap out of ourselves. We become skilled at it.
Yes. That gets into that next level of this whole concept. And it's not in my writing there, but it's a thing that popped into later in the day today. But when you get the blame, blaming is a hobby for us. I mean, we something blows up, something goes wrong. And the first thing we're doing, there's people that are being searched for who's at fault here, who did wrong, who did this. And, and it's a lot of times in political arenas, they're always trying to who blames who.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this president only slept with 8 women while this president slept with 9. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's good. This president only paid off a hooker. This president received oral sex in the White House. So none of it is, that's what we do. We automatically start defending positions by creating those scenarios of blame.
Very common.
So, the blame thing, when I'm in working with groups and families, let's say I have a family of 4 come in, mom, dad, brother, sister, and they have all kind of generic, whatever their problem is, it's very common across the board. You have everybody blaming everybody else for everything. Right. Well, if mom didn't do this would happen. Oh, I'm always the mom's saying everybody picks on me. It's their fault because they're picking on me. I don't mean to do this. I'm just doing my job. Dad said, look, you have this almost a symphony of blame. And, one of the things I have to get to pretty quick, if we're going to make any progress, we're never going to agree on who's at fault because everybody has a perspective of fault.
That's right.
So, we can say, yes, we all contributed to this, but what are we going to do to move forward? I can make even more money by just saying, look, we're going to spend the next 12 sessions and we're going to figure out who's at fault here. And I can just sit back, collect my session fee and let everybody argue away. That would be easy.
Yep.
But I quickly I said, we're never going to find out who's to blame. It doesn't matter. But so many people want to argue. If my parents didn't do this, I wouldn't have done this. That your parents did that and you did that. And here we are. That's what we got to get to. Here's where we're at.
Well, one of the most interesting things I encounter, and I'm curious to see, I suspect you encounter this a lot in your practice, but I'll be in just a conversation with a friend, about something, and then some concept of blame will come into it. And I'll make some sort of point about how, well, we really don't want to be blaming anybody. And the other person will say, I agree totally. And then 3 seconds later, there's blame going on. It's like we don't even make the connection with what we're doing.
It's the habit. It's like I said, any event that happens, we're going to have a congressional investigation of who's at fault, no matter what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every time, and there's a narrative. There's often, I have several clients that they were the sort of the blame focus in families. Like, he might have been let's just imaginary son. He's middle child. He's the one that received the blame from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, oh, it's his fault. The family's dysfunction is his fault. He eventually accepts that role. But then he's like, everybody's blaming me. So he's now blaming them for blaming him for this whole thing. So the cycle of blame continues, and we never, you can spend years. I have grown men, 45-year-old men that are talking about how their mother, preferred their brother over them. Mother's dead. The brother's grown successful, and they're jealous. And it's like, okay, you've identified the origins, but do we want to are we going to stay here? Do you want to stay where your 45-year-old man's worried about your mommy and what she did to you when she's deceased, and your brother who's not thinking about this, but you are? So it's about a launching point from blame. So blame gets stuck into this factor as well. You have reality creation, but what blocks some of that sometimes is when you get in the process of blaming, then you're almost defaulting to somebody else's narrative of what your creation is going to be. You're going to create one way or another, positively or negatively, by not doing anything or doing something. There's a creation. There's always creation at play. It has to continue. So your perspective, I am the black sheep. I am this. It's my family's fault for making me feel that way. Then you have created that reality, which is reoccurring. It's just reoccurring, and it'll keep going.
And let's be honest, once you've got that pattern going, because you described it, I think, as a habit, and if it's a habit that's been playing out over years or even over decades, it's so thoroughly ingrained into the nervous system and thoroughly ingrained into the thought process and so forth, that even when you've identified it and kind of made the agreement, okay, what are we going to do about it? You still have a really strong tendency to go back to, for lack of a better term, the blame game associated with that thing, because it's just such a huge thing that it has taken on a power of its own. It's what it seems like. It seems like this thing has become so powerful, I don't even know what to do about it.
Yes. Blame is the ultimate distractor. It takes things away. You never you can't fix things when your focus is solely on blame.
Right.
I'm like, okay, let's accept everybody's view and let's get to solution based. But when you're in blame based, there's no path forward. And another version of this, and this one really will anger some people, Walt. So just give you a heads up.
Well, we can give out your email this time if you like.
Yeah, no, we'll stick with Walt at AOLtoday.net. That's the most efficient one to reach me.
Okay.
But the overall idea, like, I often speak about the value of exercise, nutrition, particularly and really clear here, for my healing, for my depression and anxiety. I felt exercise and good nutrition and some other factors were involved, were very effective. When medication had no effect on me whatsoever, exercise, meditation, eating well, some other type of activities that were all holistic were very effective for me.
I agree, for me too.
Yeah. I literally, this is my experience. I cured my depression and my anxiety with those methods. That's how I cured it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always amazed when I talk about my experience. I almost always encounter somebody that goes, that's not true. And well, that is true for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. I'm telling you my experience. And there are people that are angered by that. I've always wondered why that was. Well, they generally have anxiety that maybe is not cured by the other stuff.
Sure.
So it's offensive to them that they feel that I'm suggesting that they just need to exercise no more. If they know me, they know that's not the case.
Right.
But they somehow extrapolate by that because they feel that I'm now somehow blaming them for their stress and anxiety, when all I'm trying to do is share this worked for me. And I tried to exercise, that didn't work. I'm sorry. Then you need to follow you need to find the path that does. You need to find what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always amazed at that because there's people that feel almost violated when I suggest that Joel, cured my depression, anxiety, and addiction by doing these things I said. I don't understand why they feel that I'm blaming them when I'm making about my experience. But it really is part of that. Their reality creation about their anxiety, their belief of how it's treated, the defense of their anxiety and depression as incurable is something that is really debilitating from my perspective, but it's not my business. If that's their reality, keep doing that, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, it comes down to what are you going to choose, and they've chosen a particular path that is hard for those of us who have taken this path to understand. I mean, I've certainly explored it. I've had people here on the show who expressed a similar kind of belief system, not too often, but I've had a few like that, and I have to admit, I learn from them.
Sure.
I learn more often from the ones who I disagree with than from the ones I agree with. I was making that point yesterday. And that really is true. Doesn't mean that I wanted to embrace their mindset, but I still learn from it. I learn from it greatly. So that all by itself demonstrates the value in all these different perspectives, even the ones that just don't work for me, and even the ones that don't work for somebody else. I mean, there's still value, even though if it doesn't work for somebody else, there's still value in understanding that mindset, no matter who you are.
And that's so important. Yeah. And one of the things that we get to is that in all of this, the allowing of other people to have their own perspective and create their own reality. That is really important. So there's a lot of people, whether it's political reason, they can't accept your view, or they can't accept that you're saying somehow exercise and depression work for you. Mm-hmm. It didn't work for me. And I'm sorry it didn't. I've heard someone say, well, I exercised once and it didn't work. And I'm like, okay, maybe try more time. No, my doctor says it won't help. I have to do that. I said, so your doctor said that movement wouldn't help at all? Could it possibly work in conjunction with your meds? But there's a lot of people that get stuck in that. And again, I'm not judging where they're at, but it's simply understanding how all these things can take place. And when we live in a blame society, and you're always we're not at fault for anything. So one of the radical responsibility, or the radical, what's the book? I forget. Really good book. I think it's Radical Responsibility, where you just own everything.
Yeah.
A lot of people, again, really don't like that. You are where you are because of you, period. That's a harsh message for many people.
It is. It's very harsh. It's hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Now, this is also reminding me of something else. And once again, Sam will recognize this as a David Stricklism. But David talks about something he calls hammering. And hammering is what he defines as something that you're trying to make something happen. Instead of sitting back and letting it come to you, the law of attraction, you're trying to kind of push it. You're trying to hammer it into place and just force this thing to work. And when you hammer, what the most common tendency that comes along with it is you get the opposite of what you're looking for, because you're hammering due to the fact that you don't have it. And so you're focused really on the don't have it. And that's why the hammering doesn't work.
Sure.
I think all of us at one point or another experienced that. I was noticing it particularly in my own life recently. And it comes out of the experience that I had over the last 9 months where my wife left me and then we became divorced. And during that time, I did a lot of good things to turn my life around, create my new life, rebuild things that had broken down, and so on and so forth. So I'm very proud of a lot of that. But I also found recently there were certain things that I was hammering on. I was hammering to make them happen. And when I finally recognized that I was doing it and kind of made the mental, took the mental step of saying, you know what, I'm just going to let go of those things. Well, first of all, I instantly felt better. My mindset changed. My whole vibration changed. But more than that, I remembered what I had forgotten. And what I've forgotten is allow. Just allow stuff to happen. Allow things to play out. And just trust that if you can get yourself into that higher vibrational state and stay there as often as you can, the good things are going to come out of it. That's a hard place to remember is a valid place if you're in the mode where you feel like you have to hammer. Because you feel like you have to hammer because you don't feel like you have any other options. Like, this is the only way to get there.
And I think that is a universal thing, whether it's hammering or just simply wanting it too much. You're obsessed, and by hammering, or again, wanting it too much, or you're desperate, you're willing anything to get it. What you're attracting is more desperate. You're not attracting
Right.
what you're trying to do. So the idea of, we had a guest, I don't know, years ago probably, and I don't remember his name or the sort, but I do remember what he was talking about. He was describing, he had been listening to our show, and he said he was really kind. He said some nice things, but he said, I wanted a relationship, and I've been wanting a relationship really bad, and I haven't been able to manifest that. The rest of my life's great. My health improved, my finances improved, and he goes through the list of everything that was really. He said, I'm much better there, but how come what I'm mainly after isn't coming to me? And that's where we said, because you're focused with it seems positive, but you're focusing with a lack. You're bringing lack. Lack is the hammer. You're lacking, so you're using lack to hammer away at it. And I want it more, and so you push that away. And he was really grateful for that. We had a great conversation. He was really receptive to that. But that is what I find most people who are doing when you're pushing it away, because you're thinking again, it's not allowing. And that allowing process, sort of that word allowing, keeps popping up today, because one of my young clients who's really into the law of attraction, he told me the other day, said they need to rename it the law of allowing, which is more accurate, because we all are attracting. We're just not learning how to allow it.
Great point.
Like a 17-year-old kid. I'm like, wow, that is powerful. So allowing is within all of this, whether allowing your creation of reality to manifest as you want it to manifest, or whatever it is, that refusing to allow is the biggest tripping point for most people, because you think you're doing the right thing when you're doing the opposite.
Sam, as we've been talking about this, Joel and I, once again, you're being the avid, quiet listener, so I want to kind of draw you in a little bit. Which of these is like grabbing your attention, saying, boy, yeah, I know that one real well?
A few things, but yeah, with the allowing that's coming up, I know Abraham often refers to it as like the art of allowing. And I think once you realize and accept the fact that we create our realities, you can kind of have more control, but then understand how you do, and then you don't have to worry about it so much and just kind of allow it. But then also another thing, talking about just blaming others, I think there might be a link between that and how we create our realities. And if you keep assigning blame to others rather than taking accountability for yourself and your creations, you're just kind of manifesting more situations or scenarios where you're kind of the victim and anybody else is to blame, is what I would think.
I love that. Well said. Really well said. That I agree with that, because that's the process, as we're talking about, whether is things work out for me. Once I learn they work out for me and I can accept they work out for me, I just allow things to happen. There's no chasing anymore. It just, I posted on Facebook today, like, I don't really have a plan in life. I just see what happens, and I do. It's sort of how I live, It's a really good way to live, because I have my law of attraction, I have my manifestation, I have my reality on autopilot now. You don't have to keep manifesting wealth or success. Once you get there, it's on autopilot. It really is.
It's a great point, and I love the point that you made as well, Sam, because you really kind of nailed it. We have that tendency, once we get into that blame mode, of perpetuating the blame mode. Yeah. Because the more that we blame, the more we get opportunities to blame. Law of attraction. Are you going to do blaming? Okay, here's some more stuff for you to blame. Have at it. Have a good time.
Yeah. And years of blaming, it's, I may have, I love my parents very much. They're both gone. So when I talk about my life, it's not being negative to them. They did the best they could with what they had.
Yeah, sure.
But within my household, growing up, I never heard the words, wow, I was wrong. That wasn't discussed in my house. And, you would argue the point, even if you were proved wrong, you were going to fight for it. Mm-hmm. Well, you said this 2 weeks, it totally deflects and get into another argument. You know what I mean? Just, we weren't a household of, oh, wow, I was sorry. And again, love my mom very much. I never in her entire life heard her go, I'm wrong. Never.
Yeah. In fact, I'll take that a step further. And I can think of, I'm sure we can all think of numerous public figures who use this approach. It's the projection approach.
Yes.
So if the person's going to be accused of something or is publicly perceived as having done a particular thing that is often considered blameworthy, very first thing they do is they find their opponent and blame them for the exact same thing.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's almost like clockwork. Like, okay, it's going to happen right now. You can just tell it's coming.
Yeah. It's, one of my clients many years ago, first time I met with a guy, I've used the example before, not too long ago, but I didn't know why we were meeting. He was sort of secretive of why he wanted to meet. And so he sits down and he leans in a little bit and he gets like, using his hands. He goes, I want to start with one thing. I don't beat my wife. And I'm like, okay, well,
whoa, this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. I didn't say it out loud, but I mentally take note. He beats his wife.
Right. Yeah.
Because you start with that. Well, and of course he did, but he wanted to explain to me what she deserved, why she deserved for him to hit her.
Yeah.
But he wanted to start with a clear. So I didn't beat her. I just hit her because of this. And, and obviously we can't, that's not a good way to do it, and not condoning or of course making fun of, domestic violence, but it is, I was just fascinated by, that's one of the weirdest leads I've ever had, just first words out of his mouth. Let me be clear. I don't beat my wife. I'm like, oh, never heard that start before. So that was new. But that is that process that we're talking about, that, everything that we have going, life is what you expect life to be. And years of expecting your life to be a certain way, it does become your reality. I have empathy. I feel for people who have lived their entire life this way, the way we're talking about, and that is their reality. They've created that reality. They don't believe they created that reality, but they have either allowed circumstance to be the creator for them because they weren't actively creating, or they just bought into all these narratives, and that's just became how, and they're likely going to, in this version of life, believing that. Hopefully the next one they get it better.
And quite honestly, for me, that's where the biggest challenge is. For many people, the big challenge with this whole idea that we create all of our reality is in, how did I choose coming into this terrible traumatic situation? Nobody would pick that. But for me, the hardest one is, how is it that people go through their entire lives dealing with the same thing over and over again and don't seem to resolve during their lifetime? Like, what was the point? That actually is harder for me to explain.
Well, and that's where people get stuck in the cycles, and they don't have that clarity that they have another way out. They're resistant to the idea that they can create a new reality. They bought into it, and it is like, wow, this is very sad. I can't imagine, the gift of life. I really value the gift of life, the good, the bad, the ugly. I've experienced so many things. I've been on opposite ends of the spectrum on so many areas. I just can't imagine spending your eternity, and that's whatever that is, whatever that means for your lifespan. You're here and living that way and not taking advantage of new creation or doing it differently. I have a couple of female friends that they have to have a man in their life. They have a backup man in case that man leaves. And by the way, they all leave. And then she's posted, one in particular, she's, oh, he loves me. She's posting all these flowers that he sends her, all this great thing. And her cycle is they do well for a few months. And all of a sudden she starts posting these cryptic texts about narcissism, which, she's now, of course they broke up, and of course he's a narcissist now. And I'm like, well, for the last 7 guys, you follow the same cycle. So are you attracting how can you keep attracting these same men that are doing that? And why do you not take a break? My advice has been, why don't you take 6 months off without seeing anybody? Why don't you stop? Oh no, that's scary. But again, that's her reality.
Yeah.
So she had been through 6 or 7 men that are anywhere from there 6 months to 2 years, and it all ends the same way. And she feels like it's like you've attracted the same man 6 or 7 times.
And by the way, I do have one approach that I've taken to kind of, for myself, make sense of, how is it that somebody who continuously does the same thing over and over again, how can we understand that in terms of creating their own reality? The one sense that I have that helps me understand it a bit is, what if that person came into this life in order to experience what it's like to not change from a reality like that?
That's where you get it. That's huge, Walt, and that maybe that's a whole other topic for a show. That concept.
Yeah, we can't do it in the last 10 seconds because we're already past an hour. So that's not going to happen.
That's big. I have a deep dive on that whole concept you just mentioned. That I'd like to follow up at some point with that.
Well, why don't we make it for next week then?
Let's do it.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. Well, that's a good stopping point right there. So, Sam, once again, I'm going to come to you for the finale here. So, take 1 point. You can only take one. All right. There's only one, but take 1 point from what we've been talking about. Say that's the highlight of the show.
We create our realities, whether we like it or not. Period.
Okay. There we go.
Wow. I love that direct one. That was good.
That was really good. I'm talking about condensed, concise.
Yeah,
really?
He did exactly what you said, Walt.
Exactly. Yeah. You can see why we have him on the show, right? I mean, It's pretty obvious. Yeah. So good stuff, guys. All right. Thank you much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.